Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to the Higher Awareness Lifestyle channel, where we begin the journey into the future, trying to bridge to the future to the best of our abilities. Let me step a little bit back because some of you might be new to this and others are just kind of already in the mill and the drill and the work of activation. So for those of you who are new to this, let us say that you have stepped into a very long process that's been going on for at least 50 years. We could say historically probably longer, but let us just keep it within the last 50 years. And then for those of you who were part of the stellar activation cycle that ran between 2000 and 2017 with the big collapse into the activation of the dark galactic core in 2017, August 2017, with two major galaxies collapsing and rippling into the universal structure and changing the fabric of our universal structure, which then set in motion the last breath of our sun as she wore out her energy fields and discarded these. And what is left now is just the shell of what used to be our highly energizing sun. It is literally now just a light bulb in the sky. At the same time, because of this series of effects that we have both had what we kind of call a universal activation cycle, we didn't notice that one. We have had the galactic activation cycle, which collapsed in 2017, and we have had the stellar or solar cycles that came to its final processes here in 2022. So that means we are now kickstarting the planetary activation cycle. And what is an activation cycle? An activation cycle is something that happens when a universal structure goes into its end phase, meaning that's where it's time for people to elevate or to transfer into other systems because the current universal structure has played out its purpose and its function, and it's now time to move on to new pastures. So this is what we are doing, and this is what we're in the middle of. And that's why I said it's been going on for quite some time. And those of us who activate memories far back in history, we will know that this has been planned for a very long time. And at the same time, we are also, of course, having a lot of other dimensional, other stellar, other universal races that are trying to keep humanity stuck within this current type of reality. But with the planetary activation cycle, we are coming to that point in time where many of the other universal, galactic, and stellar races are done here because they have done their activation cycles and they have taken off. So now we are where humanity must get up to speed with what's going on. So that means it's all up to us now. So this is a little bit of kind of anxiety-provoking responsibility, right? It was easier in the stellar activation cycle. We had the Guardian Alliances. We had all of the different races that were here pushing us to do this. Now we need to do it ourselves with what we have learned, if not in the last 20 years, then in the last 30 years and the last 40 years. And this is where a person like me gets a little bit challenged because I have been quite accustomed to one type of terminology and one way of viewing things as part of the stellar activation cycle. And all of my teachings has been part of the higher order energy system and putting all of that into a beautiful context, which is now done. So these teachings are all in place now, which I am very proud of. And then I cannot rest on the leaves of victory because now we are pushed into the next set of the work that we need to do. And this is where we just say, well, I just did one level. Why do I have to do another? Because this is where we get into the planet itself. And as I call her mother, it's nothing to do with the Gaia, but that's the original construction, engineering, and template level that is behind our planetary setting, as well as the solar system is changing its configuration. So will our planet, as all of the old grids and the old levels and everything that our planet is made of will activate, so that those of us who who have ties back to the original construction, we will activate alongside with it. Whereas the cell activation cycle were mainly focused on what we call the ones that had humanoid genetics in their higher order energy system. So this is where we can say this is where what is left of humanity, 8 billion people, can now begin their activation process, no matter where they are and what they're made of and how they are put back together. But of course, as with the cell activation cycle, there are specific types of genetics that will activate. And I make this little weird distinction between DNA is kind of what we call the bio-DNA, is what's connected to our form, and that's based upon frequency patterns and frequency code figurations. Whereas when I talk about the genetics, I'm here talking about energy units that are merged with consciousness of the original type of the original solar system humanities, as well as the original solar rishi humanoid races that partake or took part in our solar system, and how they are built in together to create what we call an energy system. Some of you will call it the light body, the higher order energy system, but it's a much more complex structure than just a light body. But a light body is technically where consciousness and energy works together to create the highest purity rate, which will then begin to radiate, and that's what you see as a light body. But that is what we could call a very advanced structure that you can work with. I talk about this in the whole transition science classes, as well as in the advanced clearing work of how to get that one back up and running. And that's a little bit different approach than what you have met of other people out there, because whereas most of, for instance, if we take the Colontic sciences, they work with the Cathara grid that were oriented towards the Pleiadian Syrian humanities of Tara. So that's the middle domain feature. So that was what that teaching was made for. And I know people have not made that clarity and that complete understanding themselves, just thinking this goes for all, because they kind of put it in that way. It would have been more appropriate if they did say it, but people rarely dig deep into text. The books were complicated to read, and people kind of do this little weird mental leap, as in kind of saying, oh yeah, that applies for me too. I'm an angel too, right? And they were talking about it as if it were for all. When we listen to some of what is out there on YouTube, some of the workshops, she's talking to the people that are present in the workshop, and it's kind of the subtitle is kind of, those of you who are present here, you are part of the original civilizations that used to exist on Tara before we were scattered to pieces and blown into different timelines from where we are now part of this planet as it merged its original grids with what was left of Tara. And that's technically part of some of the Pleiadian level. But that's not just that level. It's not the only Pleiadian level. There are many other Pleiadian levels of the original Elder Strands, and they were part of some older projects, which is why what was left on Tara got sucked here back in time into and fused with our planetary grid. And some of the scattering already had prior to that in what I call the timeline event, which is technically what created our universal structure. So you see, I'm a little bit already, when I go into this, you're kind of, that's a little bit too much information, Randy. So bear with me. I'm trying to step it down so that we can do this together to the best of my abilities. I'm just putting it in here so whenever I slip, you know it's because I have been doing this for 20 years now. And with that, have got a very expanded perception of quite a lot of teaching systems as well as information. And are now trying to put all of that in together to say, okay, what do we then need to do now when we are in the planetary activation cycle, where everybody now gets their final chance to activate and get their energy systems in order, so they can either go back to the middle domain, that's dimension 4 to 6, from where they can take a 90-degree turn and then transfer into other systems, or they can attempt to do the elevation process with whatever they have got of original genetics. And if you ask me, Randy, what is your strategy and what do you see as the possibility to do? And I'll say in the whole transition science classes, I work with going back to the middle domain and there try to get onto the restoration program and there do the 90-degree turn. As things are now with the sun shut down, with the galaxy latched up to the dark wells and the way our universal structure looks now, the elevation is, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I'm definitely saying that's going to take an amount of work that, as we are all busy living our normal physical lives as well, probably will be for the very few. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying for the very few. For the rest of us, the 90-degree transfer is probably the one that is most likely for us to take. But just people that don't want to do this whole middle domain, and I'm not an angelic race, or comes from Tara, or I'm not Pleiadian, or I'm not Syrian, or I'm not whatever humanoid type of genetics. I'm just a human that is wandering around this planet. I'm feeling these pulses and impulses to work in a specific way. And that's where I just want to focus us to begin with, because of course there is a higher level on everything, and we are not all humanoidally infused. A lot of us have been, but some of us are something behind that. And that is also part of the transformative energy system recalibration and re-acknowledging that we used to be part of this solar system as an advanced solar system race before we were invaded and hijacked, and everything got changed into what it is now as part of that invasion strategy. I'll just leave it there, because everything else is explained in my courses, and I think it should be understood in its context and not just as little droplets out here in this video. Because in this little podcast, I want to do things a little bit differently, because we are here we're having the planetary activation cycle. And whatever it will lead to, it is the kind of wake up call where you say, this is now where we really get back to who and what we truly are. But at the same time, we also need to exemplify it and exist within this world and function within this world, and face some of the challenges that we are having with the physical environment around us that is also being affected by the planetary activation cycle. We are having climate changes. We are having the whole society, the world that we are part of is now being shifted into a different type of structure. We are having just 5 years ago, we had this huge bulk of people that were still believing in politicians. I would say that's probably percentage is getting less and less on that one. People are a little bit floating like leaves in the wind. The institutions they used to believe in are no longer there. So they're looking here and there for guidance and how to do this. And this is where I want to go into the psychological build up for those of us who are going to build the bridge to the future, whether we do transfer or elevation or whatever we choose to do, or remain on the planet and participate in the last 10,000 year cycle that is possible on this planet, while it still has what we call an environment, a Goldilocks environment from where humans can exist. And this is also part of some of the challenges that humanity will have in the future. So we are moving out of the Goldilocks zone with the sun doing what she's doing and burning off all of her energies, and she will become hotter and warmer, but she will not give off more energy, which we will feel in our physical bodies. So there will also be a change from our biological structure, from being oriented towards the sun and getting nurtured by the sun, into learning to produce energy itself, but also be linked up to the original planetary construction, which is not in such a good shape, unfortunately. But that's part of the activation, where we will be able to link up to some of the old racial grids with whatever is there. Some of us have already done that journey, which has been a complicated journey for those of us who were the forerunners, trying to figure out, is this even possible to do? And how do we do this, and how do we get through these different old cycles and their energetic imprint that are connected to the human bio-DNA. So I'm not saying this is going to be easy peasy, which is when I look at some of the things that are just out there on YouTube from the Colontics and some of these workshops. Some of the more severe levels of the work is in many ways and forms not really out there being circulated to the same degree. For instance, when we talk about the interview that Dean did with Carrie Cassidy, where she actually talks about the dynamics of our planet and the shutting down of the sun, and why the Guardian Alliance has put in host fields to uphold this planet for the next 200 years. And you can figure out that was in 2007, so you can figure out the state that this host field is in now due to the circumstances and what has happened on our planet and is still happening around the world, where we have some very conservative powers that are now trying to really get a grasp of our planet and linking it up to what we call the Dark Avatar Collective. And that's a whole other journey I don't want to go into. Just so you know that when we begin doing this work, this is not just about ascension. This is about really waking up to a complex reality where the challenges of doing energy work and doing the conscious evolution might be a little bit more complicated than what was put out in the 80s in the ascension teachings, mainly actually provided by what was left of the quote-unquote ascended masters, as well as the Galactic Federation. I would say, again, this was for the 80s, and now we are in the 21st century. And things are different now, and that were aimed again for the upcoming stellar activation cycle, again humanoid genetics, where we are now activating the human DNA. So this is something completely different. And I know people are feeling that, but first of all, because I'm getting that this is what we need to work with now. So, and the understanding at the same time, when we're doing the planetary activation cycle, we're also linking up to the two other Earth planets that were originally part of our Trinity, and that's future Earth as well as past Earth. And we don't really want to go to past Earth. That's not where we want to go. And that's also been some of the struggles that some of us have had that were being tried to being pushed back into past Earth in the last 5 years, where many of us have really been fighting for our independent right to remain who and what we are and not being sucked into the energies of the old cycles that are connected to past Earth. And that's cycle 1, 2, and 3. And some of you will know that type of energy as the underworld energies and what's going on there. So that's not where we want to go. Then we have future Earth that is in what we call, they should be in cycle 7, 8, and 9. They are not. So we can just say dimension 7, 8, and 9. Barely, but they are not in particularly good shape because they have been highly affected by a lot of the galactic wars, and they are also struggling to maintain who and whatever they are. And then we have our Earth that should be in the 4th, 5th, and 6th cycle. We can say the 4th, 5th, and 6th dimension, if you like, if that makes it easier for you to grasp. And we should technically be in the middle domain, but we have been pushed out into the outer domain alongside with past Earth. Past Earth should be in the outer domain, we should be in the middle domain, and future Earth should be in the inner domain. But all of these things were changed in the timeline event, and therefore these original configurations are not really, we have remnants of it in our grids, but we don't have the correct configuration to it anymore. And we are in a universal sector that is positioned in the outer domain in the Orion arm. And those of you who go back 20 years, you will remember that in the old days when we were young, we were in the Sagittarius arm, but now we are in the Orion arm. And that's part of the shift that happened in 2017, where we were pushed into the Orion system, which were also foreseen by the Klontex, talking about the activation of the Orion gate system that linked us up to that one and literally dragged us there. So this is where we are. And in all of that darkness and distortion, we are trying to crawl out and into the light and figure out how to do this. So with that understanding, yes, the sun might not be the middle domain infuser of prana energies that are density 2 type of energies that vitalizes our cellular structure, but technically the original grid levels of our planet holds it and should hold it. But they have, of course, been destroyed and manipulated, and a lot of inserted grids that don't belong there due to the different races that have been operating on our planet. So I'm not saying that's going to be easy either. But the important thing is to know there are solutions. The question is, how do we work to get there? How do we work to get there? And that's the next challenge for those of us who already been struggling the last 20 years to catch up with the stellar activation cycle. That was our high order energy system, right? And now we're going into the lower order energy system, and we are to do the same 13-year cycle work there again. And we're just kind of, come on already, right? We should be done now, shouldn't we? But not the case. We are composed of 3 different layers as following the original configuration of high Earth and middle Earth and lower Earth, which I call past Earth and present Earth and future Earth. Our energy systems are configured in that way, which I also talk about in the whole transition science classes, as well as going into the template science classes. So I'm covering the bases there with a new set of information. I know many of you are still looking into the context, and I'm not saying, shift into my teachings, because I'm not going to push you in whatever direction. You do what you want to do. I just looked at the context and said, from my perspective, their work is done. Now we need to do something else. And this is where you can either trust what you can come up with yourself, because many of you are already getting that. So, and I wanted on the whole advanced psychotherapy Facebook page, I got someone who actually wrote some really good questions that just completely taps into the processes that we are now entering into. So, I have begun there by posting some videos as well as some articles, all focused on the body and the ability to work with our physical body again. Many of us, due to the last 3 years, have been completely cut off from doing any physical exercise or anything that technically should have assisted us in doing the transfer into the planetary activation cycle. So again, we were delayed so that we would not get on the wave that we were supposed to get on. So now we are behind, constantly behind. That's the delay mechanism that whoever's left on our planet that doesn't want this to happen are constantly re-looping and putting us back in time on older timelines, trying to delay this process from happening in our body. So we are up against the tide here, seriously, in many ways and forms. So again, for those of us who already been doing this work for many, many years, we are in that challenge now of mastering one more time that enormous amount of diligence and vigilance and the ability to do this. And at the same time, we are also getting a lot of people in the 20s and the 30s that are now beginning their activation process, because some of the ones in the 20s are from the future, and they are now beginning to activate so they can keep up some of the older types of grids and try to carry that energy for a period of time. Before, instead of what we call host fields, which is a type of ancient technology that easily depletes because of the feedback loops and the feedback systems of the ones that are connected to it. And if they are in a distorted level, the host field will quickly distort as well, which we saw with the Pegasus host field from the Arcturians. How long did that last? I think it lasted 7 months, 8 months. Barely a year that was done, because things are now, due to the galactic core and the link up that we've done there, are very, very complicated. So that technology is too easy to take out. It's too easy to get to the different cube systems. And in the old host fields, it was typically putting in an enormous, huge craft that were part of some of the old alliances and some of the old ways that they did this. But due to the Orion connection and things that are now going on there, and they're already seated in their Orion infused humans, then that type of technology is too easy to be taken down, because quite a lot of the ones that have been implemented into our system that has this Orion configuration, they also have very old type of Pleiadian configuration, but highly distorted in a way that allows them to affect and take out some of the original Pleiadian levels as well as some of the original Pleiadian technology. So that's very, very unfortunate. So this is, again, a complicated matter. Nothing is simple. And that's part of the activation, the planetary activation cycle. In the stellar activation cycle, we got all of these alien races that were here either for good or for ill, all depending on what people wanted to believe in. And not until you have seen it and felt it with your own eyes will you truly be able to grasp what we're actually up against. And again, some people will never experience that because that is, they don't have the energetic and genetic affinity with it, and therefore they will never see it or they will never sense it. But for the rest of us that are have been able to see these things and sense these things, we know what the stellar activation cycle bore of complicated matters and complications, and what that actually meant and how difficult it was. And now we're doing the planetary activation cycle, where we're not only also fighting what's left of these races on our planet and in adjacent realities, but we are also up against some of what we call the military projects and some of the enhanced humans of the future that are interested in putting people in a specific direction, where they want people to do what they call the transfer into the brilliant future that they are engineering for the majority of humanity. So that's why 1 out of 10 people are now on some sort of new timeline. But for the rest of us that are either on these timelines, or we are on our own timeline, or whatever timeline we are on, the planetary activation cycle will have an effect on all of us. And that is some of the things that we will get from within now. So what is said in that very good post, and these are sensations that she felt directly, and I'm feeling it as well, because I would say 2 months ago, my body came back online again. After having been literally taken out for 5 years, being connected to past Earth, where I've been struggling to get out of these timelines and these old cyclic genetic imprints in my own higher order energy system, so I could free it and begin to reconnect it to my original configuration and original template dynamics. It has now come because our planet, and I think it more or less, I know it's not in kind of this linear sequence, but it felt like once the sun shut down, the earth came back online. It was like beforehand, the earth has just been kind of in the shadow of the sun, being dormant energetically. But the moment the sun shut down and she took the core flame out, and moved out of our system, which means I'm talking about it as an entity, which it isn't. It's a very advanced piece of technology, but it is so advanced that it actually has an interface system you can communicate with, and therefore you can communicate with it as if it is a being, but it's not. It's a very, very advanced type of augmented technology that goes with the construction of 15 rings of energy fields that holds different code layers that can be activated on different levels connected to the central sun, from where the different contour rays can shine their vibrational energies and radiation energies in to affect the human code system, as well as our vibrational field that goes with the heart and activates the higher level capacities of our consciousness inside this physical organism. That was the original construction of it. And with that one shut down, planet came back on, because it's kind of, when a system resets to default, it has a specific mechanic, a series of mechanical sequences that runs in a specific order. And once she shut down the core flame, or the I can't remember what the colontics call it, but that's what keeps the sun activated. It's like switching off the infusion of energy that connected. The sun used to be connected to other suns similarly in this kind of middle domain structure. And once that shut down, because the others had shut down as well, that whole configuration of suns that were interconnected in what we could call a middle domain network shut down, were removed out and transferred into what we call new universal cycles, where it will recalibrate itself and begin all over, which these constructions do. That's what the ancient ones built. It's an enormously advanced type of technology that's so impressive that when you kind of have this whole structures of networks of planets and suns and galaxies that are moving in these elevation cycles together. And once the majority has begun their elevation process, everybody else follows. So that is the law of the one. As when one begins, the rest will follow. So these are some very, very ancient types of developing universal structures. So once she pulled out with the rest of her network, our planet begins the same. And that's all of the planets that are interconnected in that planetary network, which used to be reality fields and not technically planetary settings as we know of them. But that's due to the timeline event. But that does not take away what we could call the original construction dynamics and how our planet will also begin to shed off her rings, activate them, shed them off, and then to do the transfer and elevation. And the sun had 15 rings. Our planet has 9 functional rings. So the remaining 3 ones they were destroyed in the timeline event. So we're only having 9 rings to shed off. So it's going to go a little bit quicker than it did with the sun. That's why the stellar activation cycle that took 15 years and a little bit plus minus years until 2017, right? So and then we had this whole ripple effect and the prolonging, the resetting. So they extended it until 2022, where they no longer could do so. And the sun was completely over. And the Kalontics also foresaw that would happen in 2022, which it has. So now we are in the planetary activation cycle. And the first 3 rings that were completely destroyed, these are the highest levels of our planet. They were destroyed a very long time ago. So that's just kind of running through deep space or nothingness. So that goes quickly. It's going to, that is done. So we are into the 9 rings, which is connecting us to the Andromeda system on the highest level. But since the Andromeda system has already done its elevation processes, whatever's left there is not of a very high vitality. So these are the first type of energies we will get, which will spark to life some very complicated, what we would call technological endeavors that we will be able to implement. So that's kind of what we call some of the most complex sciences that goes with planetary systems. Those of us who are able and capable of linking up to the 9th dimension will be able to work with. And that's some of the kids from the future that are here to do that. So that's also some of the things I'm beginning to, can I in some way or form begin to seed some of that level of information so that when they really get online, they will have some sciences to go to. So that's a little bit a long-term project of mine, trying to figure out, how can I actually make some sciences for these kids? I know they're in the 20s, but it will take around 10 years before they fully activate. And then they need these sciences, unless, of course, they already have it built into their energy construction. And then they need to activate. But if everything is going the opposite direction, that nothing around them activates, they are set in what we call a timer. So they activate when the planet reaches certain levels of momentum of energy. But if the counterforce is constantly pulling that away from them, they will never activate. They will remain dormant. So we need someone to ignite that. So that's also part of our joint work in the planetary activation cycle, as we knew it from the stellar activation cycle, was also the amount of the many that were doing it was the plan to try and keep the host fields running, as well as trying to block what we could call the dark forces from coming in. But because we did not foresee the struggle and what they had already prepared of countermeasures, I would say that did not work as well as it should. And plus, the ones that were part of the Kalontic group, they kind of began biting on each other, to put it that way. They turned against each other. So that was how that one was taken out, which is also why I'm not made some big group of anything, because these are the typical dynamics over the course of history. Whenever someone tries to come in and tries to work against what is trying to keep a status quo, if they're in the beginning, they work together, then they get infiltrated, and then they begin to turn against each other. It's a classical move. It's a classical shutdown strategy, and we've seen it so many times. So we are also to be observant of that when we are doing this work. So to meet up with some of the requirements, we need new skill sets, we need new broader psychological skills, we need cross-matched education, and we need bodies that are highly functional. So this is why we are both activating energetically, and the body's coming back online because our planet is coming back online. So that activates our bio DNA. Seriously, it does. but it's working on the code levels. And if we can't get the mind with it so that we can work with these code levels, we will activate for a short period of time. And if we don't follow that energy and that push and say, no, I'm busy, I'm doing something else, then we will miss that window of opportunity. So because we have been delayed, we have not got the first set of the wave, so we are always behind. So we must work enormously effectively when we're doing this. And she also asked, are we heading for more bodily malfunctions if we cannot use our intuition to move through these layers of energies? Absolutely, yes. And these are some of the issues I'm seeing. These are some of the things I'm trying to work my way through with. I already seeded in what we call the pattern for how to work with the biocodes, the psychic energetic level of training, how we can effectively work with our physical form to get connected to these biocodes so we can align with the activation cycle of our planet, but align in a way where we're in full control of the transformative features of these code systems, because we align to grids that are in a sad state. So we are not getting good energy, we are getting malfunctional energy, and people that are not on top of that clearing process will thereby also have these malfunction. It will literally be embedded into the human form. So this is what activation means. Whatever's there will activate so we can clear it out and transform it into its original potentials. So, and she also asked, sorry, I put out some of her personal, so it's a little bit chopped up there. So that the body's experiencing, even though most of us are doing it without knowing, we are helping clear energetically and unconsciously. The body has a systematically and metaphysical approach. Absolutely, yes. This is part of our original construction. It's part of the transformative energy system, which I have already done the course material for, as well as when I go further into the body, because there I focused most on the transformative energy system that's connected to the emotional field and how we need to clear these 9 levels of the emotional field, which is also part of some of the self-healing courses, as well as some of the inner work courses that I'm coming up with, where I'm approaching this from a biocode level of the planetary activation cycle, which means that even though I do call it inner child work, I'm looking at the inner child as an entity in itself that is connected to an elemental being, that's connected to a specific type of racial grids that holds our specific feature of our original fetal pattern, which is something completely different, just to put it in context. So I'm also running to get, and you feel that stress in me because I have been held back. I've got glimpses of this, but I am, as everybody else, being held back. So I am struggling with both getting these courses done and at the same time implementing the sciences, and at the same time also being held back and just have to go with the flow as it is. I can't push some things through when all of the energies around me are keeping me stuck in some other perception level. So that is the challenge that we will all have. So the body is now holding different energies compared to a couple of years ago, and it works completely different. And these are the cellular changes I've here touched ground with. So these are completely spot on understandings, especially those of us who have still been actively engaged in doing some kind of physical training, or had done it before 2016, where things began to collapse around us. The old world order completely began to collapse, and all of the old technologies, as well as the shift in the sun. So we are having this, the body is set free, but it's set free to do a piece of work that we are now going to feel physically. You know, we did have the ascension symptoms, but that was when what we call the humanoid genetics sparked to life and affected our higher order energy system, which then began undoing the crystallization of the emotional field, which then affected the physical form, because the emotional field does affect the physical form. But now we are getting the activation from the physical form, the code layers of the physical form itself, the morphogenetic field itself. So this is coming from below, which is why many of you will struggle with some of the old world type of cyclic or code systems, as we again call the old underworld, astral underworld creatures and entities and elementals that are rising up and have been rising up for quite some time, which is also some of the things that we are to deal with. So in all of this, saying that the first and the big step in this line of work is, aside from all of the implications I'm here giving you, we need to have some kind of psychic energetic training, which is again in the transformative energy system, and that's in the whole transition science classes. And we need to work with how to develop our body, which I'm now beginning on the code layers there. But to be able to see the code layers, you need to get rid of the prohibiting technologies, which I explained in the advanced clearing work. So to be able to do the work that we need to do to follow the pulse of the planetary activation cycle, that it can, of course, to a large degree be done by mindfulness and meditation and self-healing and clearing work and whatever you can. But if you want to go the full way, you need to educate yourself into some of the advanced technology and higher order energy system sciences that belongs to our planet, and not Tara, and not the Sirius system, and not somewhere else in another stellar system that you don't live in. You live here on this planet, in this era, in this time, with what you have become now. That's where we need to work. So with that little bit of podcast here, just seeding it in a while, I am blasting through all the things I need to do and catch up. Thank you for listening in, and I hope you will listen into the next set of videos. And definitely, I hope to see some of you do that process of thinking that will lead you to the willingness to try and embark on some of the sciences I have come up with, because there is power in the many. But as always, each and one of you that are activating, you have a huge corpus of knowledge already. You know a lot already, but perhaps some of my teachings can add in some of the blanks, fill up some of the gaps, and give you some frames of references from where you understand what you're getting within a context that then allows you to make sense of your inner information and what you're getting from within, because I have tried to my very best to create the context for you so that you both have your own knowledge, but you have the frame of references in the progression work sciences that I have created so far. So that is also my hope with doing these videos, is to get you to get to my course material, so that we will be more that will work on this very advanced scientific level with what it means to be an expanding human that is regaining his or her original consciousness structure, because we used to be enormously advanced in all sorts of sciences, and what has been put out there in the spiritual teaching systems are barely scratching the surface of what we really need to be able to do. And we also saw that in the Quantic sciences. They were much more advanced and still stepped down to the ones that were trying to get back into the middle domain of the original configurations of Tara. But with all of that said, hope to see you there. Until next time, take care. Be who you are. You're good as you are. You know what you need to know, but sometimes we need to study a little bit more so we get the correct frames of references, so that our true inner knowledge will really get the potentials, so it can unfold within a system of sciences to really get you to do the work as you're supposed to do it now in the planetary activation cycle. Thank you.